Can you hear me? All right. Okie dokie. All right, gang.
I don't suppose you've ever taken honey on
We're
in weed wood.
in
Bee wood.
in bee woods? No.
Bees find them
Naturally. Yeah, in their natural habitat. We're gonna go this way.
smaller bees.
Oh yeah, I've seen them. They are smaller. So Ralph was saying that bees that you find in the natural habitat tend to be a little bit smaller in some cases, but they'll build hives in old stumps of trees and crevices of rocks and stuff, and they could be 10 to 20 feet high, and just tens of thousands of bees, hundreds of thousands of bees in one hive. And they're pretty fascinating. Sometimes they get in homes where they'll somehow squeeze through a little part in the siding, and you could have a 20 by 20 foot beehive behind your wall. And there's times when Dave's asked to come in, Dave, who is my bee buddy, come in and extract the bees out. And the main thing, all you really have to do is remove the queen, and the worker bees will follow. It's pretty fascinating. So I'm going to switch angles here. All right. These are the Kemper beehives. And so I'm just going to scan the area real quick. This is the southeast corner of our property. So we just came in from that direction. If I'm looking out this way, right out over those bushes right there is 161. And we have 10 hives here. And this is Dave Noble, my bee buddy. He and I have been working together on beehives now for maybe 4 years or 5. Yeah. And Dave's been my savior because I wanted to start beekeeping and I had no idea what to do. And he lived in my neighborhood. He lives in Bexley. He might have moved by now. I'm not sure.
I have actually moved about 3 miles from where.
There we go. But I had one hive and it was hard keeping one hive, but now we're up to 10 hives, which is fabulous. This is Ralph. Say hi, Ralph. Ralph's one of the Kemper House residents. He lives in Olentangy. He's a car enthusiast and also a beekeeper from a past. And so he wanted to come out and help us work the hives. And so today, our goal is to extract honey. We're probably going to do it from 3 or 4 frames, but obviously there's many more frames that will need extracted, and we'll leave that up to Dave to take care of that. Now, Dave, you told me that these hives were honey or what's the word?
Well, earlier they had honey bound.
Honey bound. So what is honey bound?
Honey bound is when there's so much nectar and honey that they're producing that there's no room for the queen to keep laying eggs.
Ah, and then what's the problem with that?
The queen has to keep laying eggs because these workers, right? Adorable fuzzy workers, they only live for about 42 days as adults. So if the queen can't lay more eggs, we slowly start to run out of workers.
Well, that's not good.
I did a small extraction earlier, in fact, to give them some room, and we're going to see if they've filled up some of these frames again for us to extract some more. Now, Mr. Love here was out with me a week or 2 ago. You stopped by to visit the bees, and we had a good talk. He's familiar with beekeeping in Florida, as well as I believe we were talking about the German black bee, the smaller, darker honeybee. Yeah, wood bee. Yeah, sort of feral colonies out in the woods. And those bees are the same species as this. Honeybees, the Western honeybee is a single species of bee, and it includes everything like Italian, Carniolan, Caucasian, German black bees, and even the Africanized killer bees are all part of the Western honeybee family.
Now,
you can
now,
see-
do the Italian bees, does their honey taste like spaghetti and ravioli?
It's got a lot of basil.
I'm just kidding. I know it doesn't taste like that.
No, but that's a good point. The honey, which we will soon be able, first we have to steal it. So
Wow.
let's not pull any punches here. We're stealing this honey from
Yeah.
the bees is what we're doing. But once we steal it, we can have a taste of it. The flavor of the honey, the color of the honey, everything about the honey is determined not by the bees, but by the flowers that the nectar comes from.
Hmm.
So you would have orange blossom honey, tastes very different from clover honey. And here in Ohio, we usually call it wildflower honey because we don't have one single large crop like in Florida. Ralph's more familiar with that. Like in Florida, where they would have hundreds and hundreds of acres of orange. But as you can see, the ladies here are just all sat around here.
Why do you say they're ladies?
All the worker honeybees are female.
Oh man, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, and and they kill their brothers in the fall because their brothers do no work.
Oh,
So,
ouch.
Yeah, so there's pros and cons with that.
So maybe we don't want to be a brother.
But you can see the bees maybe know something's up. They're keeping an eye on me here because maybe they know.
Oh, is
we're
that
here
why
to-
they're facing? Oh,
Yeah.
they are facing. They look like they're guardians.
Yeah, this is an area, since this is an entrance to the hive, these would be guard bees. So
Hmm.
we're gonna see, I'm gonna just prop this
Now, when
open a
you
little
say
bit.
guard bees, what do you mean by that?
So
Do
their job-
bees have responsibilities?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm putting on my gloves. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, different bees have different jobs. They seem pretty chill about things.
They are
These
so quiet. I
Yeah.
mean, they're not even buzzing. There's
No.
virtually no sound. I've come out here when these hives are loud. And
Yeah.
so what sort of
Temperature?
determines their demeanor?
their demeanor. Well, I do all of the breeding for these bees, so I raise the queens, and that determines genetically whether they're gentle or not.
Hmm.
So it's like these are like the golden retrievers of bees, nice and gentle, very friendly.
And you breed them for that.
And I breed them for that quality.
Isn't that
Um,
wild?
But also temperature.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
I know when I go out and it's 90 degrees and 90%
Oh,
humidity,
sluggish.
I'm a lot grumpy.
Mm, mm.
But today it's a beautiful day and the bees are having a beautiful time here. So let's go ahead and see what I'm going to do when I
You
harvest
see how
honey.
calm they are, Ralph? Can you see them?
Yeah.
Frame? Oh.
Just
Well,
pull
if
out a
you
frame
need
so you can look
to go get them, I can talk about some things
at
here.
it. Yeah, let me pull a frame out so you have that.
Okay.
At least look at.
Yeah, sure.
It'll take me 1 second to get the.
So I've been doing this for 5 years, and I know just enough to be dangerous.
Once I go get my brush,
Now, what
Yeah.
is this yellow stuff on the top here?
so that's just some comb that they've built.
Okay.
Now, if you notice,
Yeah, the real yellow stuff on the
this
edge.
stuff is, we'll bring some of it in for people to see. It's propolis. Propolis. So bees collect plant resin
Yes.
and they use it as a glue.
And
That's why
how do they collect plant resin? Does that come out of the flower or the bloom, or where?
They'll collect it off the stems and leaves of
Oh,
plants.
okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And that's why I have to use this tool.
Yeah.
Because
That's
you
a
can't
bee
just
tool.
lift these out. Because the bees have glued it in because they're like, he comes and steals our honey all the time. We're going to
It's a
glue it down.
security measure for
Hey,
the
when
most
they
part.
find out there's a CVS down the road that sells super glue, I'm in trouble. You know? Trying to keep them from finding that out.
Right.
Get these ladies moving.
Ralph, how you feeling? You like this?
No, great.
Isn't this cool? You love the smell? You all can't smell this, but the smell of a beehive is, all I can attribute it to is heavenly. It is so, look at that. Look how, now
I'm gonna
that,
hang this over here.
whoa.
I'll let you talk about the cat
Yeah,
and everything. I'm gonna go get my
absolutely.
brush real quick so we can brush these bees off. The smoker's right there if you need it.
Yep. Yeah, so Ralph, do you want to do the smoker a little bit? So Ralph, do you know what the smoker does?
No.
Yeah. So it's like, it's in a sense like taking oxygen away from them, right? So the smoke, so they move away from it. Plus, it's a calming effect. So if the bees are being very active, here, so to spray a little bit on the top there, and you'll see them move away from that. So that smoke is basically, it's carbon monoxide that you're spraying on them. So they're like, hey, I want to get away from that. So if you're trying to clear a space off that you can go in and work a hive, beekeepers, so spray it on this honey frame, which it's interesting. So if you look at this is full of honey. So this single frame probably weighs a little bit less than a pound. Now, one of the things, would you say that? How much do you think this frame would weigh?
Now, I think we're getting 5 or 6 pounds.
Oh, just one frame?
Yeah, they're pretty
That
heavy.
little frame?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's not even fully.
So how much in these 10 hives could we extract in honey safely a season?
In the 10 hives, probably close to 200 to 250 pounds.
250 pounds of honey, and that will then leave them enough to make it safely through winter. So you never want to extract too much honey because it's their food and fuel during the winter time, because they can't collect and build and make honey during the off seasons.
I like to say that the honey is a lot like when bears put on extra layers of fat, getting ready to go hibernate in the winter.
Right.
And that's what honey is. It's their extra layers of fat that get them through the winter. So in a way, what we're doing.
Now, do you see Dave here has no face gear, no mask?
I'm not pretty enough.
There
has to be a certain level of.
Okay. So Ralph would be in trouble because he's a pretty man.
Yeah. You got to protect the pretty people.
Now I notice you have a frame that we're getting out now is plastic.
Yeah.
This frame is wood. Is there a difference, or is one better than the other?
Yeah, the wood frame I prefer.
Yeah, and why is that?
They're just easier to work with. These actually will saturate the wood with wax.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that's sort of a healthy thing for the bees.
Sure.
So I've just got all these really old plastic frames left over.
Yeah, they're not as attractive when they're in. I really like the wood frame as well. What are you looking for?
So I'm just making sure we've got capped honey that's ready to harvest.
Yes, that looks unbelievable.
We've got 4 frames, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Mr. Love for the smoker real quick, and I'm going to use this smoke.
And what are you burning in the smoker?
Just some cedar chips.
Oh, cedar chips. And is there a specific reason it's cedar chips?
Just those are what's easy to get.
Okay. And they burn well.
Sometimes they burn well. They keep the smoke. Now, the smoke is going to, bees, just like people, don't like smoke and can't breathe.
Sure.
So when I spray this, if you focus on these bees, what's going to happen is they're going to go away from the smoke. And we want to get them off of these frames of honey when we pull them out.
Now, does it agitate them?
You can hear that
a little bit. Yeah, you can actually hear them now.
I don't know if I would call it agitation, but it's kind of like if somebody blew smoke in your face, you would wave it out of your face.
Oh, yeah. Now listen to that. This is why I'm glad I have my gloves on.
But again, what they're doing is they're moving away from the smoke. They're not attacking me.
Oh, that sound is amazing. Yeah.
Moving slowly, yeah.
Never panic when you're working with bees, because they will sense that.
And when you move fast, insects, their eyes are built to move.
Ah, okay.
So the slower you move, the more invisible you are.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yes. Area working in the field, you're in that area, and you might just have to
get up. Well, like you've got a whole bunch of bees right around you that are wanting to make a beeline to the entrance.
You're right in their beeline.
And I bet if you moved right over here, you would see a bunch of them go straight down in pretty quick. Okay, so I'm gonna brush these off, and we'll take them inside and start getting it extracted. We got a couple more of these, and we'll So what I'm gonna do is we got a lot of the bees off, but not all.
Now the color of that looks so different than the one
The other
frame.
one.
Yeah.
So this was capped earlier.
Yeah, you can
And so the
tell
wax,
it
it
is,
starts out really white and then it just gets darker and darker.
it ages.
Yeah.
Basically like a good wine.
So I'm gonna ask everybody to come around to this side,
Okay.
because I'm gonna brush these off. And I want to make sure you guys can see it inside. But I also don't want to brush these off onto you guys. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and give them a brush, and that's all it is. Okay. Clean off the bees,
Isn't that funny?
because we want to harvest the honey, not the bees.
Not the bees.
I'm
We
gonna
don't
go
want to
set
bring
this
the
over
bees in.
here. Hide it from them so they can't find it.
Ralph, what do you think? You having fun?
Yeah.
Isn't this awesome?
We'll do this one again. And notice I'm brushing the bees. There's not that many, but I'm brushing the bees down into
Into the
hive.
box.
That way they can sort of recoup.
Now I do notice that some of the combs, there's nothing in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what's the cause of that?
Well, we can look at that inside.
Oh,
Once we get
inside. Okay,
inside.
yeah.
It just means they didn't fill it up, or they started eating some of it.
Oh,
Now you've heard the term bee bread.
bee
Yes.
bread.
You might explain what that is.
Yeah, we don't have any of it up here to look at, but yes, I can definitely explain that. Again, honeybees don't make honey for humans. They make it for honeybees. This is their main food source, and bee bread is another source of food that they use. We can definitely talk about that a little bit more. I'm going to set this one over.
I hope you all are enjoying this as much as I am. I wish you
then-
could be out here with me because the smell and the sound, and it's just very peaceful and relaxing. And I know that's one of the reasons why Dave loves it,
Oh,
because
yeah.
it's like his sanctuary.
I'm going to knock these ones off real quick.
Now, why'd you do it that way?
Just because there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
Just to get them off a little quicker, we're going to brush the rest of them off. Both sides. All right. So I'm going to set this over there. We've got 4 frames of honey to extract. We've been in here long enough.
Yep. They
What
get,
we're going to do is we're going to close her up.
they want us out.
And then before I leave, I'm going to bring those same 4 frames back and put them right back in here,
Sure.
and they'll reuse them.
How long do you think it would take them to refill that with honey? Because we're not taking the wax out, the
Correct.
comb, we're just taking the honey itself.
Once the goldenrod and all the fall flowers, or the late summer flowers, I should say, start blooming,
Yeah.
they could technically, depends on how many flowers are around, but they could in 5 days have that go back.
Wow.
But
And
usually
and you're
takes
and
a little longer.
right now is a dearth, right?
We're entering yeah.
Into a dearth. So a dearth is the part of the season that things just aren't blooming like they were. You know, it's dead of summer and things are struggling because of heat and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just harder for bees
Just
to
not as many
plants.
flowers
Yep,
producing nectar.
exactly.
They may be in bloom.
Yep.
But this hot heat, just like how I said, when it's really hot, humid out, I don't feel like doing a lot of work. Plants are the same way.
Yeah, they conserve.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
All right, well, let's head back in. We'll grab some of these. We could all grab a drink or two. We'll head back in. Bring the brush just in case any bees
I've got that.
land on the way.
And I'll make sure you don't have any bees on you. You're good.
Yep, I got them all.
So Dave, what do you do during the winter time, considering your main source of income is beekeeping?
So I am I'm planning for the next year, but I'm also building equipment,
Yeah.
repairing equipment.
Yep.
I still do teaching
Yeah.
throughout the winter.
Yes.
and,
He's taught me. He's a
and then-
great teacher.
And then I also that's when I do some of my reading and research
Yeah.
Um,
Sure.
to get ready for
So
the next
getting
year.
ahead of the game, basically.
Yeah. Yep, that's my prep time. Just like anything in agriculture, farmers don't have crops growing in the winter,
Right.
but they don't stop working in the winter.
No.
They're
Yeah.
getting ready for the next year. This
Now,
will be the exciting part here in a minute. We can really see this honey just come right out of the spring.
now
Is there a company that makes the beehive itself with part of that you
the
can buy?
frames.
There's a lot, yeah. So I've bought some from large companies, but also I bought some from the Amish up in Ohio. They'll do a lot of woodworking.
Yeah, of
And I've
course.
also built some of my own. And it depends on the type of equipment.
And-
As you'll see, this big the extractor I've got in here is made by Maxton, which is a big company.
All right, I'm gonna shut.
What I'm going to do, so I'm going to explain some of this, and we'll talk about some of the things. We did a great job here. I'm going to give us. We
If we
didn't
do
bring
say
a
so
single
ourselves.
bee in with us. So when I usually do a big extraction, 1 or 2 bees usually follow me in. But we've got a couple of experts here. So this is the frame of honey. Okay, I'm going to turn it around here, because here you can see some open honeycomb cells, and I'm just going to bring this around to all the tables. What the bees do is they bark into these.
Ew.
And the bee honey is basically flower nectar that the bees eat and regurgitate, and eat and regurgitate 6 or 7 times. Okay. Then it becomes thick enough that we call it honey. And once it's thick enough, that means the water content, I'm going to come around to the back and show you one. The water content in the honey is so low that bacteria can't grow in there. So it's perfectly safe and healthy now. But when the bees do have it like this, that tells me that it's right and it's ready to go. Okay. Now, here's what we have to do in order to get the honey out. We have to take these cappings off. So I use this sharp knife, but I plug it into the wall because it heats it up. So like a warm knife going through butter, this knife will go through this wax. I'm going to plug in right behind you. Okay. It'll go through this wax nice and easy. And then, so turn our knife on. Once I've got the wax off, I let the honey drip and drain off the wax. But you'll see most of the honeycomb is going to go back out into the hive. So the bees don't have to make more wax. So the wax cappings that are left over, I can melt down. And I can make that into, what should I make beeswax into? Any ideas what I could use it for?
Candles,
Candles. You can use it as an ingredient in soap and all kinds of things.
lip balm.
Lip balm is another one. So I'm going to go ahead. Wait for this to warm up. Turned up. We just got to wait for this to warm up,
That's all right.
and then I'll.
One step at a time. You got to be
Yeah.
patient with bees, that's for sure. We work at their pace, not our pace.
Yeah. Well, we didn't want to leave a hot knife laying
Yeah.
around either. Because,
Right. Does anybody here not like honey? Everybody loves honey, right? Like, who doesn't like honey? I've never met anybody. You like honey?
love honey.
Love honey. Really, like, it's one of the foods that I've never met somebody that didn't like it.
I have to
Never.
tell you, and I may do this next time we do this, I was so tempted to go put some, when we open up the lid, to have some artificial sweetener in there and go, oh, these bees did it all wrong.
That would have been
But I
good.
thought nobody needed my shenanigans today. Okay, I think this is getting hot enough.
Now tell me again what we're trying to accomplish.
So what I want to do is I want to get this wax that's sealing the honey in off of this frame. So when I do that, you'll see a bunch of honey start falling down out of here.
So just like what we do with our food, that we seal it, we put it in the refrigerator, we make sure it's fresh. Bees do the same thing by capping off the honey so it's in a little container for them so it lasts forever.
In fact,
Wow, look at that.
I remember as a young kid working with my grandma in the kitchen, making strawberry jam, and then we would pour paraffin wax on top of the jam,
Yep,
and that's how we would preserve it.
remember that too.
And the bees must have worked with my grandma too, because they like using wax to preserve it.
Now, it looks very dark.
Yeah, the comb is very dark because it's an older comb. But we'll see what the honey looks like when it comes out.
Now, what about those that you can't actually reach? The
Well,
little caps.
we're gonna get them.
You're gonna get them? You know what you're doing
We
there.
have a different
Oh, a
tool
little different tool there.
that we can scrape this
So
out with.
show that rake to the camera. Oh, yeah, okay.
And Mr. Love, if you would be so kind to take the lid off of the container behind you.
Okay.
Either one or both of those can go off. There you go. Perfect. So I'm going to put this in here and then we'll describe what this is going to do in a minute. This has a container. One frame. Beautiful. Okay, we're going to cut one more frame here. And then I can turn the knife off because you see it's starting to smoke a little bit. Look at that.
So how do they get the wax? I mean, where does the wax come from?
They make the wax. So, as I mentioned, the honey is basically, and I don't want to, it's technically not really bee bark, but cows, for example, have to chew their cud. It's very similar to that. Grass is difficult for cows to digest. Pardon me, I'm going to turn this off. So they have to keep regurgitating and chewing and adding more stomach acid and working it. Honey is the same, it's very similar. Nectar is hard for bees to digest, so they have to keep doing that. The wax, however, comes from glands in their abdomen, and they produce wax. They build all their comb, and that's where they live. Their wax is their home. And it may seem strange. Here you go, let me just catch my breath a second. Whew.
This is sticky business. There's no doubt. This
Yeah.
is messy.
I'm gonna wash my hands. Let me get this one in. I'm gonna rinse my hands off and then I'm gonna finish answering that because I don't wanna. And this goes in here. And this is just what we call a centrifuge. We're gonna just spin it. Yep. And that's gonna, all the honey's gonna come out of there.
What do you think, Ralph?
Okay, pretty cool.
So,
Never had one of these.
I know, that's pretty neat.
It may seem strange that animals produce wax, but how many of you have ever cleaned your ears? And what are you cleaning out of your ears? Wax. We just don't use that to store our food in, right? But bees do. But it doesn't come out of bees' ears, because bees don't really have ears. If they did, they probably wouldn't put up with me, because I'm talking all the time and nobody wants to listen to me for very long.
Your voice must be relaxing because you're sleeping on it.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Commercially, would the beeswax be turned over and sold commercially?
Yeah, so he's asking, could I sell this beeswax? And a lot of beekeepers do. We'll melt it down into blocks that we can weigh, and then we'll sell it by the pound. Okay. Or my wife helps me a lot. She likes making the candles because obviously, if we make the wax into a candle or we make it into a lip balm, we can sell it for more than if we just sell it for somebody else to turn it into candles.
Now, would you consider your wife the worker bee or the queen?
Where is she? Is she here? No. No, she's definitely a little bit of both. She makes everything happen.
There we go.
Okay. So we're gonna spin this here, and if anybody wants a chance, I'm happy to let you do the work for me. I mean, to have a chance to do this. You never have. But we're gonna put this filter in here. Remember how I was scraping on it? A lot of that wax, I don't want in the honey. I want to capture it separately because I can sell it. And even though you can eat this wax, most people like a nice clear liquid honey. So we're gonna do that. And I'm gonna start this spinning. I don't know if you can get a picture in there. We'll see how it starts to throw the honey out in a minute.
Oh yeah, you can see it on the side.
Yeah. And it's just gonna get heavier and heavier and start to fall down.
Now, at your house, do you have obviously a mechanical?
Yeah, no, I don't. I have about 60 to 80 hives. So that's hundreds of frames to extract.
Yeah.
And I obviously don't have big Popeye muscly arms. So I have an electric motor at home, and it's a much bigger extractor too.
How many frames will it hold? 20 frames. Wow.
20 frames at a time. And my buddy Dan, who has even more bees than I do, he has an extractor that'll hold 100 frames.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
At a time. But look how it's really coming down the edges there. In fact, if people wanted to come by and see, that would be fine too.
They can actually see right up on the screen.
Oh, okay. Stop until you get inside that. Yeah, see all that honey on there? So it's just gonna keep going down and down, and we're not even close to.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna, with 4 frames, it might not even.
Oh, it will.
Oh, it will?
The frames aren't even close to empty yet.
Do you want me to spin some?
Yeah, well, I'm fine for now.
You okay?
Yeah.
So how often do you have to, if you have, what do you say, 80
Hives.
hives with hundreds of frames, you do a frame 3 times a year?
It all depends. So I have to watch the bees. I'll tell you, in general, I tend to extract sometime in June. Maybe early June, I'll do a small extraction. As we mentioned out there, they'll get honey bound, and it's hard for the queen to lay eggs. So I'll extract them. Then I'll extract sometime in July, maybe in September. It just depends on how much honey they produce. Because again, by September, most years I end up giving them supplemental feed. And so if I'm giving them supplemental feed, I'm not taking any of the honey off.
And what would be the supplemental feed?
Some pollen, but mainly some sugar water to replace the honey.
That sounds like a ripoff.
Yeah.
Here, I'll give you sugar water for honey.
Well, but at that time of year, I'm not taking any more honey, but I'm just giving them. So in other words, they got honey. I'm just making sure they get a little extra energy.
So that's about 3 times you take it?
Yeah, maybe usually 2 times almost definitely. The 3rd time it just depends on the conditions. But when I do a harvest with that many hives, I'm obviously, I'll spend a couple days pulling the honey off of the hives, just like we did here, only I'll stack it in boxes. And then I'll spend the rest of the week running the extractor. And those will be 12-hour days of just doing that. What you saw me here do, uncap and throw it in. Now, as you can see, when I help train other beekeepers, I always tell them,
they don't want to spend tons of money on the extraction equipment. I'm like, well, for every dollar you don't spend on extraction equipment, you'll spend hours in doing this. This is just my demonstration extractor. Let's see how much more is already coming out.
So it's not gonna come out the bottom until you open it.
Until I open it, once we get enough in there.
Yeah, it's not
You
even
can come have a
close.
look in here and see. I mean,
So it's starting to puddle up on the side. Okay, Dave. I'll go
Yes.
do some more.
let me just check and see where we're getting there on this one. We'll get the other two in a minute. And at first, you don't want to do this too fast because that honey is very heavy. We should take around and have everybody get a feel of how heavy your frame is before I extract it.
Yep, and then afterwards.
Yeah. So you can imagine this is just half of one box, these 4 frames. Imagine doing one box with this hand crank take about an hour, at least, if not a little more. So I'm all for, give me the big extractor and the electric motor.
Yes, absolutely.
And that way I can, once I get it loaded up and turn it on, don't tell my wife this. I can sit back and maybe have a beer, just relax while the extractor does the work.
That's easier than this, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So why did you get into beekeeping? Why'd you do this?
When I was in college, I was studying plant breeding. So I wanted to breed like tomatoes or beans and stuff like that. And who else helps us with plant breeding? Bees, because they pollinate everything. So I actually got a job at the Honeybee Research Lab. And at that point, they were doing a breeding project. And so the lady who ran the breeding project took me on. And once she found out that I would get stung and still come back to work, she decided I was worth training. And she taught me how to breed bees and how to manage them, how to extract the honey and everything like that. And I fell in love with it. And so my college degree is useless. I don't know, I haven't used it since. I've got a degree in plant breeding and plant pathology that I never used.
Well, it led you to your career, so
Well, I was gonna say, I'm not,
something good came out of that.
absolutely. It was
Your
time well
passion in
spent.
life, you were built to do this,
Yeah.
so. The beauty
No,
part
I
is
just-
you love it.
I do. I love hanging out with the bees. I've had a couple of interns and assistants from time to time. And one day, we're almost done with these ones, I think. My assistant and I met my wife after work. And she asked my assistant, she goes, "What was it like? So what's it like? You worked with Dave for a couple weeks now. What's it like working with him out in the bees?" And she said, it's okay. She goes, "Once I realized that when Dave's talking, he's mostly talking to the bees and not me, things got a lot easier."
This will wear you out. It's tiring.
Yeah.
Gotta be strong, strong like us.
All right. I think we're ready to see. There's still some. We're getting there.
Dirty dogs.
We're getting there. But I'm gonna let you two work on this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring this frame around to give you an idea of how heavy these are. I'm gonna let you hold them for just a brief second. Let me wash my hands. I'm trying not to pass sticky around. Now, one thing I think is important for me to mention, as you saw when I was out there, this is how I was dressed. For most of the year, this is my beekeeping outfit. I always have a veil handy that I can put on. Nobody, even me, who's been doing this for 25 years, likes bees up my nose. So I do have a veil that I can put on. And I always have other protective gear at the ready. Okay. Me going out there without protection doesn't mean that just anyone can, right? So I always tell people, bees are a lot like dogs, in that if the dog knows you, and if you know the dog, you can get along better. But I know my dog sees somebody they've never seen before, they can bark at it. Right? But never approach a beehive because you never know whether they're gentle or not. Also, the bees have trained me over the years to work with them really slowly and on their terms. Okay? So a lot of times young new beekeepers go out there, they work a little bit rough, and that upsets the bees. I'm gonna bring this around. If everyone who wants to feel this, just stick your fingers out like this, and I'll let you get a feel for the weight of this frame. Okay, so just stick your two fingers out like that. Okay. One there, one there. Right, you got it. That is pretty heavy, isn't it? Yeah. All right. A frame like this can be filled in about 5 days.
Oh, wow.
If there's the nectar resources.
Yeah.
Much harder than I anticipated.
Yeah. It's it usually takes to get a whole box of crop in June, takes a couple 3 to 4 weeks. Because remember, they're eating this at the same time that they're putting it up. I don't know how many of you have done canning. I know when we do canning, we're canning tomatoes. We're eating tomatoes and canning them. It's the same with bees. Do you want to get a Anna, do you want to get a feel for the weight?
Dave, you didn't tell me this was gonna be hard work.
Right. If I had told you it was going to be hard work, I'd be doing it now instead of you. You want to feel the weight of it? You want to feel the weight? Okay. Just hold it here, there you go. Pretty heavy, huh? There we go.
She's not even looking at me.
You want to, okay, we'll come back here and you can feel it. So just stick your two fingers out like that. There you go. The weight of that. Pretty good, huh? Good and heavy. You want to try? Okay, good. Just stick your fingers out like that. Right on that side. Yeah. Well, huh?
Dave, you want me to take this out yet or keep going?
I think we can take them out. I'll turn this knife on and we can get these other two. I figured we need.
Did the bees remake the comb part? Or is
Well,
that
you'll
just-
see where we didn't damage too much comb, and you can come up here and see what we took off. They will remake, but we're leaving them like 90% of the wax that we took out.
Okay.
So Greg can bring that around, but they will. They
Oh,
can make,
my God.
they can make new wax at any time, and they'll repair that.
You can see the.
What they'll actually do is when we put that back in the box, the bees will just cover it.
I don't like bees. but I like-
Anytime there's open or loose honey, the bees are attracted to it, they'll slurp it up and go put it somewhere else. And once they get that comb all dried, so there's no more honey and stuff on it, then they can repair it. So just like any kind of repair, you know, clean the area.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it.
All right.
Hi, Nancy. How are you?
All right, I'm gonna wash my hands again. Most of the, a lot of my time, when I'm extracting is spent washing my hands.
Pretty neat, huh? All the honey's extracted.
Okay. There we go.
All the honey's been extracted. Okay? Nope, nope, it's not yours, it's just a look at.
Now, if you guys want, when you come up to see
Wash your hands, there's-
these cappings that I've cut off, feel free to pinch off of it. The wax is edible and it's covered in honey as well.
Ah, they're very sticky.
See the honey's been extracted.
A wet paper towel, okay?
I think it's pretty extracted, Dave.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
we'll do this next one and then we'll be able to have a good look at what we've got. That can that's right in there. And then we'll see, because this year so far, the honey's been a really, really light color. It's not been that sort of golden amber honey color.
Wonder why.
It happens from time to time, and it's just some years there's more blackberry blossoms. Other years it's the black locust tree or catalpa trees. Whatever's producing the most nectar is what determines what our honey looks like.
Tell her she can come in and sit with her if she wants.
Okay, there's a cord, but I'm pushing it under the table.
Okay.
That cools off, just
Yep.
for
No worries.
heads up.
Yep.
Everyone.
Come
Okay.
in. It is so messy. Here.
Well, Ralph brings up a good question. There is clover honey in here.
Okay.
Now, not enough to call it clover honey, but because there's also tons of other types of honey in here too. But there's a lot of clover in some of the fields around here. It's just not enough to be sure that's the only thing the bees are getting.
Now I know why honey's so expensive.
This is not.
It's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
And not only for us, but for the bees.
Yeah, the bees especially. So in fact, this type of beehive was developed by L.L. Langstroth in 1851.
Oh, wow.
We still call it the modern beehive. That's how old-fashioned beekeeping is. But before, you would just steal the comb and everything. And then the bees would have to replace all of that, which is a big cost in time and energy. So by returning this, they now don't have to build this comb, which means they can spend more time making more honey. So using this system doubled and tripled the yields that we can harvest from the bees, and it kept the bees healthier.
Yeah, and making wax is one of the most taxing things on a bee, is that correct?
Yeah, so it's approximately, they need to consume 10 pounds of honey to produce 1 pound of wax. So wax is very, very valuable. And that's why we want to return as much of it as we possibly can to the bees, so they can focus on pollinating our fruits and veggies and making more honey for us rather than making more wax. I'm gonna go wash my hands again. I'm sorry?
Oh, you can see it really coming out.
They make it. So they have, so just like we have wax glands in our ears, the bees have wax glands on their bellies.
Oh,
Because they don't have ears.
okay.
And so what happens is a worker bee, when she's really young, she can really gorge on honey. And Mr. Love mentioned bee bread, which is a mixture of pollen and honey. And that'll activate her wax glands. And then she'll produce wax, and her sisters will scrape it off of her belly, chew it up in their mouths, and make their home out of it. Which I know sounds really bizarre. Like imagine, hey, we want to put an addition on the house. Okay, scrape away and build.
What's the life expectancy of a bee?
So worker bees, so here's a funny thing. When I think of honeybees, I think of the colonies. So if you ask me how many honeybees are back out here, I would say 10 colonies. Even though there's maybe 20 to 60,000 individual bees in each colony. So a colony lives year round, but the individual workers in the summertime only live for about 42 days as an adult. Approximately the first 20 days or 3 weeks of their life is spent inside the colony, doing things like feeding larvae, processing honey, making wax. After that, they become foragers, where they leave the colony. They're built, they actually, unlike us, they can't repair muscles. So they're built to go about 500 miles or something like that, and that's it. And they'll be dead. So about 42 days total. However, they might get eaten by a bird or a skunk or something else. Once they leave the hive, it's a very dangerous world for a honeybee. That's why they stay in the hive for the first 20 days. So they live about 42 days. The queen is laying eggs every day throughout the summer. She can lay as many as 1,500 eggs a day, which means that there's 1,000 bees dying of natural causes every day too. In the winter time, the bees don't have to leave the hive. They don't have to forage because they've got all this stored honey. And those bees can live up to 4 months long. So they can survive the whole winter inside the colony. So those are, when I go out into the hives for the first time in February or March, those are some of the oldest bees I'll ever see, apart from the queen. And the queen, I've had queens that are 4 years old. The textbooks say they can live 5 to 8 years. But usually 4 years is about the maximum.
So does the queen bee have babies all year round?
No, in the winter, so here's, I just said yes. And in the winter, let's see how to say it. The queen bee actually, she doesn't run the colony. The workers actually make all the decisions for the colony. They may even decide they don't like the queen anymore, and they'll raise a new one and kill her. So the other thing is, queens are built to only, like, their job is to lay eggs. And they work like this. If you feed a queen, she lays eggs. The more you feed her, the more eggs she lays. And so she doesn't even get to choose how many eggs she lays in a day because it's all, she doesn't feed herself. The workers feed her. They regulate how many eggs she lays. When we get into winter time, they put her on a strict diet. And she will lose almost half of her body weight over the winter because they're just feeding her enough food to keep her alive and not lay eggs. Because if she lays eggs in the winter, that larva has to be fed. That's more mouths to feed. Yeah. So she's kind of the opposite of us humans. Queen bees go on a winter diet. We go on a summer diet, right?
Yeah.
Which I gave that up years ago. I figured this is my beach body. My wife says it's my beached whale body, but whatever, it works.
How far will the bee travel the farthest?
Yeah, so
He'll come back and
she'll be able to come back. So bees can forage, one colony, so the colonies back here can forage over 25 square miles, which means they can fly as much as 4 or 5 miles away from the hive, collect nectar and come back. Now, the further they go, the more energy it takes for them to get there and get back. So just like us, they're going to go to the nearest source that they can find. They don't want to go any further than they have to because it costs more energy to do that.
So how do they, when they're 5 miles away, how do they find their way back? What is that sense? That
They
gets them?
use their smartphones, Greg. Plug in the GPS coordinates.
they follow the bee line.
They follow a bee line and they navigate just like people have navigated forever. They use the sun. And they actually see, anybody ever had those polarized sunglasses? These have polarizing eyes. And so when they see light, all the light points towards the sun in straight lines. And so they know if the sun's this direction, my hive is whatever, 45 degrees to the left. And as the sun moves through the sky, that angle changes. So they know in the morning, their hive is 45 degrees to the left of the sun, but in the evening, it's 45 degrees to the right of the sun. And so they have kind of this chronometer in their head that lets them know that the sun's moving. And Mr. Love was exactly right. The term beeline comes from bees. When bees leave a colony, they'll meander all around, flying in all different directions looking for flowers. They find a flower, they'll get the nectar, and then they fly in a straight line back home. because they don't want to waste any time or energy, right? It's always quicker to go in a straight line than to make a bunch of turns. See if you're getting that honey out of there. We're probably almost ready to open that gate and see the honey come out.
It's halfway up the little pipe, so that's good.
Yeah.
So
So
is
back
it-
in old, I'm sorry, just one more thing and then we'll get your question. Back in the olden days, to find wild hives that were living out in the woods and trees, you'd go to a patch of flowers and catch honeybees. And you'd hold on to them for a half hour, an hour, and then you'd let them go, because when they return to the hive, they go in a straight line. So if you let them go and they go that direction, you just start walking that direction. So at a flower patch, you would gather up half a dozen or a dozen bees, let one go, walk, let another one go to make sure you're still going in the right direction. And you could actually find feral colonies that way. There's a professor at Cornell, and he's one of the top bee researchers in the world. And he's retired now, but he's still, he's one of those professors that doesn't ever really retire. And he wrote a book. He spent 5 years learning the craft of beelining to find bees in the wild. And he wrote a whole book about that. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
So is it possible for a bee to join another colony?
Bees have some of the best foster care systems in the world. So sometimes I keep my hives close together. In the wild, they would be much further apart. And sometimes a bee will come back and they'll, by accident, go into the wrong colony. But if she shows up with a full load of nectar or pollen, they're like, sure, come on in. You brought some food, you can be part of the family.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I'll even take larvae from one hive and put it into another to help boost their population. And they just accept those as members of the colony. They're all part of the same family, and they're really good about that. There are times when it gets really, there's not much food available, then the hives will fight with each other. Again, just like humans. I know my two kids, if there wasn't much of their favorite treat, they would fight over it. All right, I think we're going to open that up and see if that comes out at all. We may even.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, you can go ahead and get the camera right on the.
Now, I just wanted to show how sort of, it's pretty, it looks pretty sticky and messy in there, and you can see a lot of debris in that, so that's gonna flow out, so.
Go ahead and get that, and then there you go. You can open that funny. Just go ahead and open it now. Straight up. Oh.
Oh, wow.
Baby, that is Kemper honey
Yeah.
right there, at its finest.
It's so light.
Now, what we can do is if there's
Wow.
pop this up and we'll tilt it, and it'll flow out a little bit better.
So didn't you say the darker the honey, the sweeter it is?
No.
Or the-
No, that's a good question. Honey is usually the same sweetness, but the lighter colors just have more of a floral taste sometimes. It can taste more like flowers, and then the darker honey tastes more like honey, if that makes sense. It's that sort of honey. And that color difference depends on the flowers it comes from. Here in Ohio, the general rule is early in the spring, you get this really light colored, almost water colored honey. And then it just gets darker and darker and darker throughout the summer. So when we get into the goldenrod and thistles and asters that are blooming, the honey becomes a lot darker because those plants just have different trace elements in them that make it a little bit darker. There's actually, when the goldenrod pollen comes in, so they don't use the pollen to make honey, but they ferment the pollen. Just like everybody's crazy about fermenting food and kombucha and all that. Bees have been doing that millions of years. They ferment the pollen, which releases more nutrition. But goldenrod pollen, when it ferments, I say it smells kind of like dirty gym socks. And you can be walking into the beehive and go, you could be 10 feet away from the beehive and smell it and be like, oh, I guess the goldenrod are in bloom now. So, yes, sir.
How do they get the wax?
So what they do is they've got these wax glands in their belly,
Oh, okay.
and they'll force feed themselves sort of honey and pollen, and that stimulates those wax glands.
Uh-huh.
And it's really similar to how we have wax in our ears. And we have to clean it out, but they have wax coming off their bellies and they have to just scrape that off and use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something I've been kind of curious about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
That feeds a lot of wax. Must take a lot of wax to make a hive.
It does, yeah. So in fact, when I start a brand new hive and I don't have any comb for them, they have to build all their comb. I end up not harvesting any honey that first year because all of the extra honey that I would normally harvest goes into making that wax. Yeah, yeah, about that. Hold on. We just want to make sure we get some of that wax out of there before we taste it.
Does the wax ever clog the?
It can, it can. Usually these are big enough that the wax will go through, and that's why we have those filters to straighten it out more. But yeah, it can. I actually use a plastic. So in the middle of this is a piece of plastic, and I'll bring it around because you can see it here. It broke a little bit. And that way the comb never breaks. If you were to use just natural beeswax as the foundation in there, spinning it that hard might break the comb. And you can see that black plastic right in there. And that's not for the bees. The bees don't need that. That's so that I'm not destroying their comb. And it's better for me, the beekeeper. But as you can see, they just build that comb. Here, have a feel of that, an empty comb. No. So remember how heavy that other one was? Here's what it is empty compared to the heavy.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how much. There's like 3 or 4 pounds of honey in a frame. Yes, I'll bring it right back to you. There's a black plastic in there. The bees don't need that. Out in the wild. Yeah, feel how light that is now. Nope, that's good. Yeah, just take a little bit there. And tell you that, that's gonna be nice and sweet. Have a taste of it. Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Taste it, Idella.
Taste it and see if it's sweet. No, all right.
How we doing, Dave?
We're doing great. We can just let that sort of filter out. What I'll probably do, Greg, if it's okay with you, we'll get the honey out into there. We'll let it set here. I'll just leave that bucket and stuff here. Okay. You guys can help.
Yeah.
You don't even have to clean out the bucket. Just once you get the honey out. Ooh, let's see this though. Oopsie. We're about to have massive. That was open. I forget, I leave those open so they can breathe when they're in storage.
Since there's so much corn and soybeans in Ohio, are bees necessary to help pollinate all of that, or is that different?
So corn is what we call a new world crop. So it's wind pollinated because honeybees are not from North America and South America. They've never been here until we brought them here. So most of the bees that are here, and there's some 5,000 species of bees in America, but they're solitary. They don't live in big colonies, stuff like that. So no, honeybees definitely not needed for corn. And in fact,
Hey, I have a tough time believing that.
What?
That honeybees are not indigenous to the United States.
Yeah, they're not.
How is that possible? I don't get that.
They're from Asia, Europe, and Africa. So just like apples, were never here until we brought them here. And a lot of fruit. Tomatoes are from Central America. And when we think of tomatoes, we think of Italian cooking. Italians didn't start using tomatoes in their cooking until the mid 1700s. So when you think of traditional Italian food, It's really more traditional Aztec fusion with Italian food, right? Soybeans are different. Depending on the variety, honeybees can help pollinate them. They're not required for pollination, but some varieties produce a lot of nectar, and it's good for honeybees to make honey off of. So it just depends on the variety. Nobody's bringing honeybees to Ohio to pollinate crops, whereas we will transport bees out to California to pollinate things like almonds. They go to Florida on big semi-trucks to pollinate oranges and other citrus fruit, all through Texas for cotton. And then honeybees are also really important for pollinating clover and alfalfa to produce seed. Here in Ohio, a lot of farmers grow hay, but they actually chop the hay at what they call quarter bloom. So just as the clover and alfalfa is starting to bloom, the farmers mow it down to make hay, because that keeps the most nutrition in the plant. But that means the honeybees don't get to get the nectar from it. Whereas if there's a place that produces clover seed, you need the honeybees there. In fact, I'll put this question out. What state do you think produces the most honey by weight? Any other state of all the 50 states? I'll give you a hint. It's not Alaska.
It's down, is it down south?
It's not down south.
Oh, okay.
I'll say it's in the central US. So it's west of the Mississippi, east of the Rockies. No one wants to guess. It's, I mean, wrong
No,
answer.
Geography is horrible.
Kentucky.
Kentucky, no.
Iowa.
What did you say? I'm sorry.
Illinois.
Illinois. Now, I will tell you, this might be a surprise.
Oh, Kentucky.
North Dakota.
Oh,
North Dakota produces more honey than any other state. North Dakota also produces more clover and alfalfa seed than any other state. So the bees go up there, and farmers will contract a beekeeper and pay them per hive to make sure their crop gets pollinated so that it turns into viable seeds.
One question I had.
Yeah.
In the lower states, for instance, Florida,
Mhm.
would have a longer duration of things getting ripe and so on, than it would be in North Dakota.
Yeah.
So would then you would be harvest more honey in Florida than you could in North Dakota.
Not totally.
Okay, okay.
So because there's so much clover there,
Yeah.
they produce so much more.
Oh,
So Mr. Love made a great point. In the southern states, which you thought too, it makes sense. Southern states has a longer growing season. That means more blossoms for a longer time. The problem is, I shouldn't say the problem, it's not a problem. The difference is, in a place like North Dakota, you have 50,000 acres of clover in bloom all at once, producing literally tons of honey. Whereas in Florida, in general, outside of the orange groves and stuff, there's things blooming a little bit here, a little bit there, all year round, but just a little bit at a time. Whereas up north, everything blooms in a really short window. Tropical bees, so when honeybees live in the tropics, they don't produce as much necessarily of a honey crop, but you never have to give them supplemental feed because there's always something blooming for them. You know, certain times of year. And in fact, if we've heard of the African bees, the Africanized killer bees, they're the same species of bees that I was out there wearing no protection with. But the place that they come from is home of like the honey badger and elephants and things that love to eat honey and honeybees. So they become really hyper defensive just to survive. But also, Africanized honeybees can produce 2 to 3 times more honey than our European honeybees. They have a slightly longer tongue, which means they can get nectar from about 30,000 more plants than the bees out back here. So it all depends. As you move to the tropics, you also get bees that can export more plants because there's different plants down there. And they all kind of adapt to their local conditions.
Bee bread.
Bee bread, yes. So bee bread is when you take, so pollen is a protein source. And pollen, the bees actually, when they're pollinating plants to make fruit, they're actually stealing the pollen from the plants and that's like their meat. That's where they get their protein.
You'll see pollen on them.
Yep.
If you look at them, just a
Little speck on their back legs. Yeah, they carry it in, and they're it's called a corbicula or a pollen basket.
So does that help pollinate other vegetables or anything?
Well, bees have something called flower fidelity. So if a forager bee goes out and they find a dandelion, that means they're going to only go to dandelions. They'll be like, I'm on a dandelion mission today. So they're taking dandelion pollen from one dandelion plant to another one, and that's how they pollinate. But the pollen they bring back home, that's not used to pollinate plants. They turn that into bee bread, and they mix it with a little bit of honey, they ferment it, and then they feed that to their young larvae. Because the young larvae need all that protein to build their body. And once they're an adult, they rarely eat pollen after that. They just eat sugar. So it's kind of the opposite of us. Well, I know when I was young, all I would eat was sugar, licorice, soda pop. These are a little bit the opposite.
Dave, I think we're
good.
ready for some trials here.
All right, so let me close this up.
What I was thinking is maybe we probably have some food back here. We can take a little dip for everybody and everybody can do a little taste of it. Yeah, so maybe we just scoop out and take them around. Everybody gets a spoon. We can take it right from this.
I'm not today.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we'd just dip it right out of the bottom of this.
Right. but he-
Wow, look at that.
Bees-
It looks like stew. Bee stew.
Yeah. So, actually, what we can do, pour
Well,
some
we
into
could
another cup. Yep.
Just pour it out of this.
Yep. And let me do that for you here real quick. Let me wash
Okay.
my hands one more time.
Yep.
Okay. So, thanks everyone for bearing with me and listening to me, because I know you're only doing that to get to this part of the day. To taste some of the honey.
So where do you live?
I'm over in Whitehall, east side of Columbus.
Okay.
And so we've got hives here at Kemper House, Whitehall, Bexley, New Albany, all over the east side.
Really?
Yeah.
So you have the hives right here at this,
There.
Right in the corner.
I don't think we walked 100 yards
okay.
to get the honey in here. I think for next year I'll prime that a little bit with a couple extra frames to get it flowing better.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Hey, it's a learning.
It's all right. Yeah.
We've been wanting to do this for a couple of years.
Yeah, we're doing
And we
it.
finally got
We're
it.
doing
We
it.
finally,
We're doing it. Our
after
vision
everything,
has
we
come-
finally got it. I'm gonna
has
move that
come
there. That way if
together.
it drips on the table. And then I'll let you and
And then
your
if you guys
helpers.
want to help, just get a little dab for everybody. That would be awesome.
So this might not taste like the honey you're used to from the store.
Oh,
It's a real nice, light floral taste. You won't mistake that it's honey, but it just doesn't necessarily have that real strong honey flavor. A lot of times the honey that you get in the store is put there by
It's funny.
honey packers, which means they buy honey from hundreds of different beekeepers,
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
pour it all into a big giant vat, warm it up and mix it until it's all one single color. And then they pack it up. So here, when you're extracting honey from a single hive or a single location, you get that sort of that unique taste and flavor.
Good. Awesome. Made right here at Kemper House. beginning and end. Full body. Full body. That's right. It's a good year. Yeah, right. Exactly.
In the stores,
That's right. Years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, cost wise.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave. So what is the deal between?
And you don't need it that strong. I mean,
No, and it's using a little bit, that's right, because it's expensive, so make it last.
There is a cost difference between honey when you're in the store. What is something more, is it a local provider versus
Well, a
a
local provider, and then
national?
a lot of the large honey packers that I was talking about, they're buying their honey in 55-gallon drums. They won't buy anything smaller than that. And a lot of times they even buy by the tanker load. So like a big semi-tanker. So
Honey,
this
that
is,
much honey. Wow.
yeah, so these are the people who go up to North Dakota
Yeah.
and are pollinating the clovers. They'll have 5,000 or 10,000 honeybee hives that they're managing. And so they have these giant, 200 frame extractors that just pump the honey into a truck.
Sure.
Just like a milking operation.
Yeah.
And then that's the guy who's got a semi-load of honey to sell needs to get rid of it quick.
Yeah.
So they sell it for a lot cheaper than local
Wow.
producers do.
So
But
it's
their
like a
costs,
commodity.
Their costs are a whole different.
Yeah.
They're actually getting paid for the pollination services too. So several people from Ohio that I know send their hives out to California to pollinate the almonds, and they get paid something like $200 to $300 per hive that they send out there. They're not even selling the honey. They're just selling the labor of the bees pollinating the flowers. So then they can, when they have lots of honey, they tend to sell it a little cheaper. Yeah. Just like anything, when you get a big industrial scale, the prices change. Price structures change. What does everybody think? It's definitely honey, but it's not off the grocery store shelf honey. Can you taste sort of the, did you guys get taste of it too? You can taste it's almost like a flowery, you can almost taste the flowers it comes from. I'm gonna pull these two
Well,
things
Dave,
out.
can you just in closing, just tell us what bees mean to you?
These are, Rick, I'm gonna have to, there's a little video I did with this company.
It's
I'll have to send it
beautiful.
to you, but.
I know, I've seen it.
Oh, I have seen it too.
I love it.
I love bees. Greg alluded to it when we were out there earlier. Because bees can sting you, you really have to be gentle with them, right? And if you're gentle with them, I was out there barehanded,
Yep.
no veil, and I didn't get stung today. Because the bees have taught me that if I just calm down, and it really is kind of like meditating. And I'm not saying I mean, I get stung almost every time in the bees. But it gives me such a break. We're in the middle of moving, and we're building a new honey house and a new headquarters for our business, and it's all this stressful. And then I go out into the bees, and I just talk to, I tell my wife, I'm going out to see my girls. And I'll talk to them, and I'll see how they're doing, and I'll check their health. And I'm doing it in sort of a calm, relaxed way. And to me, there's just nothing more satisfying than working with the bees. And I mean by working with them. They don't work for me.
Yeah.
If anything, I work for them.
Yeah.
But it's collaborative.
Yeah.
And I get to know that each colony has its own personality.
Sure.
And so I get to know there are colonies that are not on my top favorite list. And there's other colonies that I just adore, and I'll raise daughters off of that colony. And that way I get more colonies that I like.
Wow. Well, we want to thank you, Dave, for coming in and teaching us and letting us do this. Ralph, thank you for participating. I hope you enjoyed it. And so we'll continue to do bee classes on a monthly basis until winter time, and then we might even do some stuff through winter time that's more educational. So this is sort of, I love this. I know Dave loves it, and Ralph, do you love it?
Yeah.
Back
home again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to let you in on a little secret, we just purchased a 1957 Ford Fairlane
that we're gonna restore here at Kemper House, and it's out in the parking lot. And so our goal is within the next 8 months to have a Ford Fairlane restored that will be restored by the Kemper family. So that's another exciting thing we're gonna be doing here at Kemper House. But thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoy it, and God bless.
Who? Oh, really?
Alright. So I'm gonna get these back into that colony.